gathering in for our 2 o'clock agenda for the Committee on Education. We're in room 309 and today's date is March 24th. Thank you everyone for joining us. We have a very aggressive agenda with lots of different things to tackle. So first up we have HR 93 and our first testifier is from Hawaii Community Foundation, Justina Acevedo.
Hello, and I do apologize, I'm in transit. I'm Justina Acevedo, across from the Hawaii Community Foundation. Aloha to all of the committee members. I do stand by our written testimony on this measure and hope that we can find strong ways to help implement Act 46 and expand our early care and education programs for all of our keiki. Mahalo.
Thank you very much for your testimony. Up next, we have Linda Ilento in support.
Hello, this is Linda Ilento, and yes, I am parked. Just a busy mom at the moment. I wanted to just ask that the Committee on Education consider for this particular measure, if you are going to pass it, that it would be specific to include stakeholders that are individuals, the community, children in a commercial pack. Anyway, just either in the bill itself or like in the committee notes or something. But issues such as continuing early intervention, like a previous bill that you had heard, those kind of issues can be discussed and need to be heard from parents that this kind of information affects. So I appreciate the opportunity for this bill, and if you find it necessary to further tell the board what to do, I appreciate your including these suggestions. Aloha.
Thank you so much, Ms. Lento. That's all I have on my testifiers list. Is there anyone else wishing to add testimony to this measure? Seeing none, members, are there any questions?
One quick question.
Chair?
Thank you, Chair. Is ELB or EOEL present? They're not present. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Vice Chair.
Thank you. Moving on to our next measure, HR 11 HCR 13. Up first, I have Department of Education providing comments. Department of Human Services.
Aloha, my name is Iva Kane. I'm the Assistant Administrator for the Division of Vocational Rehabilitation, here on behalf of the Director of Human Services, Kathy Betts. And we just want to say that we stand on our written testimony on this measure. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That's all I have on my Zoom testifiers list. Are there any questions? We also have Disability and Communication Access Board in support and the Early Learning Board offering comments and the Executive Office of Early Learning offering comments. Members, are there any questions? Not that there's anyone besides DHS to ask them to. Okay, seeing none, moving on to HR 17, HCR 19. Up first, Department of Education in support. A.S. Tanaka.
Hello, Vice Chair Capella, Chair Woodson, Randy Tanaka, Office of Facilities and Operations. We stand by our testimony in support of this resolution. Any questions? Ready to answer. Hello.
That we also have, that's all I have for on my testifiers list, wishing to testify in person or on Zoom. But we also have the Executive Office of Early Learning offering comments and a number of individuals in support. Members, are there any questions? Seeing that, I actually have a question for A.S. Tanaka.
Yes.
Thank you so much. Do you know what happened to all of the classrooms that were being used for junior kindergarten?
For, I'm sorry.
Junior kindergarten?
I'm not sure, but I can tell you that a few years ago, we did an assessment of all classrooms across the state. So we have a pretty good inventory. From the time, as you can imagine, space gets moved around and things get used differently. So we would go back and do some of these assessments, but we have a fairly good idea of our inventory of rooms. So I don't expect this to be a heavy task. The only thing that vacillates is enrollment size. Some years are better than others, so to speak. So some of those rooms will be adjusted accordingly.
Thank you, Ms. Naka.
Thank you.
Members, any other questions? Okay. Seeing none, moving on to HR 34, HCR 40. Excuse me, HR 35, HCR 40. Up first, I have DOE in support. Nancy Shijima.
Hi. Good afternoon, Vice Chair Capella, Chair Woodson, and members of the committee. Chair Ushijima, Interim Assistant Superintendent with the Department of Education. We stand on a written testimony in support of this measure. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your testimony. Thank you for being here. That's all I have for my in-person testifiers list. We have a number of individuals, about 6 in support and 2 in opposition. Members, are there any questions? Okay, seeing none, moving on. We have HR 45, HCR 50. And I have AS Tanaka, DOE, in support.
Hello, Vice Chair Capella, Chair Woodson. The department stands in support of this measure. Just a comment or two. Prioritizing will probably have to be advanced further. Not all the parents report in at the same time. So our counts could jump depending on, because we match it with the free meal program and the free transportation program, and then it kind of trickles down. So we would kind of back into that based on the application. So numbers could shift based on when the parents report. So it may take us a little time and some adjustment. We probably have to take a look at our rules to see what guides us in that area. So, but we stand by the support. Thank you.
Okay.
Hello.
Thank you. And you're the only testifier offering testimony on these measures. Members, are there any questions? I have a quick question, AS Naka. And I know we've been having conversations about school bus drivers and transportation, but just for the entire committee, because I think this is something that's impacting our entire state, is the lack of bus drivers. Can you talk about some of the things that you folks are doing heading into summer to address the bus driver shortage and kind of the order of what you're doing?
So as we follow this chronology of what happened nationwide shortage, being out so long, people really need to find means to take care of their families and pay their bills. So we had people finding other jobs, creating that gap that we have. We've done a number of mitigating opportunities. We've compensated parents to carpool and drive kids together. We've looked at the one that is hardest to do is the bell schedule change. So we can shuttle the buses instead of just one trip by shifting the times that kids come to school. There's some national evidence to say that starting school later for the earlier grades is fine, but the elementary level should be at where it is today. We've also looked at partnering with our county transportation providers, providing bus passes. We even looked at the program that a car rental company had on renting the vans for an extended period of time. Got a little caught up in some of the liabilities and the qualifications of the drivers. So we had to kind of back off of that. We are now looking at a 2-year compensation period where the rates for the drivers would go up a bit. Our contracts are all coming due for negotiation now. So we're trying to see how we can back into that. The challenge we have with that is trying not to raid the other forms of transportation, the county transportations, and stealing their drivers because our pay level is a little higher. So we want to balance that a little bit. But that's kind of what we've been working through. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Naka. Are there any other questions, members? Okay, seeing none, moving on to HR 46 HCR 51. And we have, once again, Mr. Tanaka in support, Department of Education.
Aloha. And Tanaka, we stand in support. We provided written testimony. Should you have any questions, be willing to answer it. Thank you. Aloha. I should note that when the volcano was active a couple years ago, there was a different funding to provide air filtering in the rooms. We enhanced that this year when COVID came along, and we put air purifiers. We concentrated it in the Big Island areas that were most susceptible to the winds and that direction. So all those schools are geared with air purifiers. So that's one of the mitigation measures that we took. The challenge we had, you got to close up all the windows and all of that. So the purification of that area is critical. Thank you.
Thank you, Naka. Okay, that's all I have on my Zoom testifiers list or in my in-person testifiers list. Members, are there any questions? Naka, I have a question. Thank you.
Getting my aerobic exercise today.
You're getting your steps in.
Thank you.
At Tuesday's Education Committee hearing, you mentioned that a new kind of air conditioning system is available that includes air filtration systems, kind of what I think you mentioned as well for VOG mitigation. But is that correct? And what would that or any other new type of air conditioning technology be used to help?
So there are many different kinds of systems, split systems and none of that, but the technology we've seen most recently is window air conditioners, easy to install, quick to install, with filters on them, HEPA filters. And what that helps us to do is the old systems would put too much strain on the compressors, and the life of the AC units would be quite shortened. But now with these new systems with the filter, it helps us in two areas. Obviously, purification of the air. And during the COVID period, we encouraged the schools to open their windows and open their doors to promote the circulation, which reduced the particulate amounts in the room. But they would run their AC also. So that created another problem with energy and trying to cool the entire state of Hawaii fundamentally. So this new system allows us to close the rooms, run AC, and purify the air. So that technology is fairly new. So that's what we're beginning to install, and that's what we're going to advocate for installation.
Thank you, Naka. Moving on to HR 50, HCR 56. Up first, we have Patricia Holigal in support.
Aloha. Thank you, Chair Woodson, Vice Chair Capella, and committee members. My name is Patricia Holigal. I'm a professor at the UH College of Education and testifying on behalf of the Tinalak Council. You may read our full testimony in support of the resolution to implement a Filipino history, culture, and identity social studies course in the DOE. I wanted to take the time to actually lift up the Filipino Curriculum Project, which is actually a team of committed public and private high school students who've actually been experiencing some invisibility in their education, and they're doing something about it. And so I think it's really important to hear that they're designing curriculum for a social studies course that they want to learn for Filipinos, about Filipinos, and connecting it to non-Filipinos. So I hope you'll read their testimonies. Many of them aren't here today because they're in school. And on a personal note, I just wanted to say that I never learned about my identity until I got to college. And I don't think that our high school students should wait to learn about their rich history and culture in school. And so I appreciate all the wide community support, the multi-ethnic community support that we've received on the resolution. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Up next, we have DOE providing comments.
Yes, aloha again, Vice Chair, Chair, members of the committee, Terry Ushijima, and we stand on a written testimony providing comments. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And up next, Amy Agbayani.
Aloha.
Human rights in support.
Thank you. Aloha, Chair Woodson and Vice Chair Capel. I want to stand by my written testimony. Hawaii Friends for Civil Rights actually sees this as an equity issue, and I believe it will benefit Filipinos and non-Filipinos in our community. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your testimony. And up next, we have Leon Florendo in support.
Aloha, Vice Chair Capella, Chair Woodson, and members of the committee. My name is Leon Florendo. I represent an organization called Sadalingoa Youth Council. We've submitted a written statement, as well as I submitted one as an individual, as a parent. You can go ahead and read our written testimony, but I just want to add to my the written testimony just how proud I am of the group that has stepped forward, and Patricia's being very humble. Her daughter, Marissa Haligao, had reached out to me about a year ago as the president of Sadalingoa, mentioning what she had encountered in her school, wanting to learn about her Filipino heritage. And so she reached out to our organization to see if we could reach out to some of our partners in the high school, if they could find other students with like-minded interests in learning about their Filipino heritage. And I've been able to support them in that effort, and just watching them and what they do is just very heartfelt. And like Patricia, I had to learn about my Filipino heritage in college. And as a multicultural, being of Filipino and Samoan ancestry, oftentimes we don't get to hear about our history in the public school. And you know, one of the things we want to do is, and we talk about this in our leadership conference, and the students are uplifted, but that's only for such a short period of time. If it's not reinforced through the DOE, they don't see any value, or it's not reinforced and it's not validated. And I think it's through these efforts, and it's long overdue. And thank you to our young people for shedding light on this, because it wasn't us professionals that came up with this initiative. It was our teenagers who said, this is not right, and why is it? And stepped up and asked for help. So I just wanted to put that out, because that's the foundation of this resolution. And but thank you for hearing me out, and thank you for your support. Aloha.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Florendo. Up next, we have Caitlin Agnes in support.
Hello. So my name is Caitlin Jane Agnes. I'm a recent graduate from Kapolei High School and one of the members of the Filipino Curriculum Project, and I'm here to represent this. So the project is a student-driven public-private school collaboration of Filipino students. We are creating a curriculum about Filipino history, culture, and exploring one's own self-identity, and are submitting a course proposal to the DOE. So I'm a second-generation immigrant from the Philippines, and I grew up feeling a disconnection between my family because I couldn't speak the language, or I didn't know much about the history. And for these reasons, I felt lost saying that I'm Filipino American. I don't want future generations of Filipinos to feel this way also. So supporting this bill will also benefit those who aren't Filipino, because the Philippines culture includes vast similarities with other ethnicities, like those from the Polynesian Islands. This curriculum will also allow every student who chooses to take this course to embrace the culture and self-identity. And as a group, we already received a lot of support from the DOE by connecting with various education leaders, and we hope to gain your support as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for your testimony. Up next, we have Brianna Agas in support.
Good afternoon, Vice Chair Capella, Chair Woodson, and members of the committee. My name is Brianna Kamatagas, and I'm a graduate student at the University of Hawaii at Manoa. I strongly support this resolution as a second-generation Ilocano and Yonsei Gosei Japanese scholar because students like me have always and continue to want to learn about their histories and see their heritage reflected in their curriculum. In advocating for this resolution, students such as those in the Filipino Curriculum Project have shown their commitment to their community through their testimonies and curriculum development. They are being vocal about what matters to them and actively taking charge of their learning. Therefore, I feel that it's extremely vital to listen to their student voices, to fulfill their needs, and create spaces for our youth to engage in their culture. Similar to other testifiers, I too have only learned about my culture in college and regret that I have not had those experiences in my elementary and middle school years and even high school because it did create such a great disconnect. So I truly believe that this resolution serves as the first step towards creating curriculum and courses that are reflective of our diverse and ever-changing society. Thank you for your time and the opportunity to testify. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your testimony. Up next, we have Shannon Cristobal in support.
Aloha, Vice Chair, Chair Woodson, Vice Chair Capella, and the members of the committee. My name is Shannon Cristobal, and I'm a PhD candidate in the Educational Foundations Department at the College of Education at the University of Hawaii, and I am the Director of Hawaii History Day and K-12 Humanities Programs at the Hawaii Council for the Humanities. I am testifying as an individual, and I do not represent either the UH system or the council. I am also testifying as a parent also. I am fifth generation Filipino American. Both sides of my family were plantation workers. I was born and raised in Kalihi. I attended Kapalama, Kalakaua, and Farrington High School. And like the others, like Leon and Patricia, I also did not receive any education or any history or culture about Filipino, my Filipino identity until college. And it wasn't until my 30s that I got to receive any of this. And so as a parent, I don't want to see my children have to go through some of the things that I've been through with self-hatred and imposter syndrome. And being in my PhD right now, I could have surely totally have needed that. And I am also, as the director of History Day, Filipino history, having a Filipino history, culture, and identity social faith course for high school students is not exclusive, but inclusive, as we can learn how Filipino and Filipino Americans are part of American history, as part of Hawaii's history and world history. Our history is intertwined in multiple histories that are marginalized and silenced and have not been taught in formal education. And this bill would help support that. And yes, thank you for letting me testify, and thank you.
Thank you very much for your testimony. And our last Zoom testifier for today on this measure is Norman Salas.
Hi, good afternoon. Chair Woodson and Vice Chair Capella and members of the Education Committee. I am Norman Salas, and I am currently serving as the School Strategic Planner at Farrington High School. And I have been teaching many students of Filipino ancestry. I am testifying as an individual and do not represent Farrington High School. House Bill 3343 from the 24th Legislature, the bill that designated October as the Filipino American History Month in Hawaii, recognizes that teachings of American history have often overlooked the historical role of Asian Americans, including the role of Filipino Americans whose heritage spans a colonial, political, economic, and cultural relationships with the United States. However, more than 10 years after the bill was passed, the history, culture, and identity of Filipino students are still not emphasized in our curriculum, just like what the students who testified today said earlier. Many of my former Filipino students, who represent about 58% of the student population here, returned from their semesters in college sharing their frustrations of not learning about their history in our high school classrooms. And that's also consistent with what our students said earlier. They had to wait until they reached their college lecture halls to learn about their history, especially the history of Filipinos in Hawaii and the United States. I support this because our students deserve representation in the curriculum. They deserve to leave our high school classrooms with a better understanding of who they are so that they have a stronger path of where they could be. And I would like to commend the work of the students in the Filipino Curriculum Project because they're demonstrating what student voice truly means. And when these voices are amplified, we do need to listen to them. And although their work is focused on Filipino cultural history and identity, it's a powerful template, not only for our Filipino students, but all students of any ethnicity or any group. Because if they see that this group of kids feel empowered, that they're listened to, I'm sure all our other students will feel empowered to do the same. So I believe that could create a ripple effect in our student population in the state of Hawaii. Thank you for allowing me to testify this afternoon.
Thank you very much for your testimony. Members, that's all I have on my testifiers list. Is there anyone else wishing to testify on this mission? Okay, we also have in support from the Filipino Curriculum Project, and then about 24 pieces of testimony in support from a number of individuals. Are there any questions? Representative?
Hi, good afternoon. I feel compelled to say something as a son of a Filipino immigrant and as someone who shares a story similar to many of you who testified. And when I see you speaking, I see, you know, my Lola and my titas and my whole dad's side of the family. I've got a question for Mr. Salas, Dr. Halagao, and Dr. Agbayani. Can you describe the term that you said earlier, invisibility? How does that affect some of the students that you work with? And if we were to pass this out, could something like this be replicated for other historically marginalized communities or currently marginalized communities, say the Micronesian community?
Hello, this is Amy Agbayani. I'm the oldest in the group, so I'll answer first. I think the term invisibility, I only talk about the term invisibility. It's a very accurate one because although Filipinos have been here for over 115 years, and we are the second largest ethnic group in the state and the largest group in the public schools, we are extremely underrepresented in the curriculum and in higher education, in most professions. And it's just an issue of accuracy to include Filipinos in the history of, and also discussion of the future of the state of Hawaii. So it's for accuracy, equity, and our goals of diversity.
Thank you, Manang Amy. I will add to that with more of a story. When I do research, I talk to students and I ask them about questions about what they learned in school. And one time I asked a student, Maria, in a school that was about 65% Filipino, and I asked, well, why do you think you've never learned about your history in school? After they had just learned a lesson that I had taught. And Maria looked at me and she said, well, it's probably because Filipinos haven't done anything important. And that's the kind of feeling that you get when you don't see yourself represented in the curriculum that you learn, because you just don't see it. So this is really important, I think, not only for accuracy, but also for just feeling important and valued.
Yes, thank you, Patricia and Manang Amy. I think the importance and why we should address the invisibility of our students in the classroom is because when they do not know where they have been, they do not know how or when they can move forward. Many of our students have not learned their histories in Hawaii and United States. For example, histories about the St. Louis Fair in 1904, where they brought Filipinos from the Philippines to participate in what was human zoos, and that resulted to many of the stereotypes that are known about Filipino and about Filipino students nowadays. Our students don't know that, so they just accept facts, or not even they just accept what the things that they hear around them, and that's what they live by. But if they learn about their histories, the reasons of why they are here, especially their ancestors' participation in our plantations in Hawaii, I think that creates a stronger identity because they understand why they are here, and that gives them opportunities, and they feel empowered to do something better for themselves and, of course, for the community where they currently live.
Thank you so much.
Yes. Representative Casales?
I just have a comment, not really a question. I just wanted to say thank you, especially to the students. As you know, all the testifiers have said, this is really a shared experience, including my own, not learning about our culture until college or even after that. But for the students, you know, I also recognize that you are doing something even larger than just sharing the importance of including the Filipino culture. But what you're also doing by working together is really kind of breaking down those walls, those barriers between public school and private school. So just want to acknowledge that I see that and really appreciate this, the big picture of it that's going beyond really the subject what we're talking about today. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Members, are there any other questions or comments? Okay, seeing none, moving on. HR 67, HCR 74. We have no one here to testify in person, but there are a number of individuals in support, including Kaneohe Bakery. So we'll move on to the next measures because there's no one to ask questions to. Next is HR 134, HCR 134. And up first we have DOE offering comments.
Good afternoon, Terry Ushijima again. The Department of Education, we stand on our written testimony and we are available for questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And then we also have testimony from Bronson Azama, an individual in support. Please go ahead.
Yes, mahalo ni Alhamay. So just testifying in support for this measure, I think when it comes to education and even like to the point of the one of the previous measure regarding Filipino history and culture, we really need to start changing our educational system to fit our needs. And I think when it comes to a lot of issues, you know, we're all told what the issue is in school. I went through the public education system myself, but we're not given the tools and resources sometimes to even prepare us to face the issues that are presented in front of us. So I feel like this measure will be super helpful because we need holistic means of education to really help find the holistic solutions. So it's time to start preparing us now rather than always saying, deal with it when you get older. That's my comments in regards to that measure. Mahalo.
Thank you very much for your testimony. Okay, that's all I have on my testifiers list. Are there any, does anyone else like to testify on this measure? Seeing none, members, are there any questions or comments? Okay, seeing none, moving on to HCR 35, HR 35. I have the DOE in opposition.
Good afternoon, Chair Woodson, Vice Chair Capella, and members of the committee. Sean Bacon, Interim Assistant Superintendent on behalf of Interim Superintendent Keith Hayashi in the Department of Education. The department stands on its written testimony respectfully opposing HCR 135. I want you guys to know that, please know that we are 100% in support of the Farm to School initiative, and we are appreciative of the legislature's commitment on that. But what we do oppose is the implementation of the Farm to School program that would be part of the annual principal evaluation. The implementation of the Farm to School standards on the principal evaluation, we feel, would not be fair and equitable to all principals. Some schools right now have production kitchens. Other schools right now only have satellite kitchens and they receive meals from other schools. So that's where we're feeling there are some inequities there. The department really stands ready to work with the legislature and figuring out the most effective and efficient way to implement this program. And I really thank you for the opportunity to testify, and I'm available to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, AS Bacon. That is all I have on my testifiers list, and that's all the testimony that was submitted. Members, are there any questions? Seeing none, I actually have a question for the DOE. AS Bacon.
Yes, Rep. Capella.
Okay, how does the DOE currently evaluate how well administrators are doing in implementing local food production mandates? And who is responsible for managing that at the school level?
So currently right now, Office of Facilities and Operations has been a key instrumental part of implementing this. I know that they have been working with local local food sources and trying to ensure that they are on our vendor list so that the cafeteria managers and the schools are able to source products from local vendors here. I know that is what currently the department has been working on at that point through AS Tanaka's office.
Okay, thank you very much, AS Bacon.
Thank you.
Members, any other questions? Okay, seeing none, moving on to HCR 164, HR 164. Up first, we have the DOE in support.
Good afternoon, Terry Ushijima again. Yes, we stand by our written testimony in support of this measure for our fine arts. Thank you.
Fantastic, thank you so much. That is all that is on the testifiers list. Members, are there any other questions? Okay, I have a question. AS Ushijima. So I grew up dancing, and I have a great love for the arts. I'm also a dance teacher. But I have many parents in my communities that have expressed just concerns for funding for the arts and education having been cut over the years to pay for things like standardized testing. So in my district, which is incredibly poor and very remote, access to arts education is very difficult to come by. Has the department ever done an analysis to determine how much funding has been cut from the arts to find out what schools may need additional help in sustaining access to arts education?
I'm not certain, but I have our art specialists who might have information. We may or may not have that, but if she could have an opportunity.
I'm grateful to know that the DOE has an art specialist as well.
Arts, and she does the whole range: music, performing arts, visual arts. So one person for all of that.
Right. Thank you. Of course, that also adds the media arts as we go forward. I do not recall having that type of data that was collected. However, we do know that we have numbers in the secondary level of what courses are being offered, which discipline, and the number of students that are in those classes.
Fantastic. Would you be able to send that to
Sure.
me via email?
I
That would
can
be
do
great.
that.
Thank you very much. Okay, those are my questions. Thank you. Okay, seeing no other questions, moving on. HR 38, HCR 38, and up first we have DOE providing comments.
Yes, Terry Ushijima again. We respectfully offer comments on this measure. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your testimony. We have Hawaii Youth Services, Judith Clark, in support.
Aloha Chair, members of the committee. I'm Judith Clark, Executive Director for Hawaii Youth Services Network, which is in strong support of this resolution. Our LGBTQ students, youth from communities of color, and students with disabilities need and deserve to learn in settings that are inclusive of their experience and give them the education necessary to stay safe and healthy. For LGBTQ youth to experience comparable health benefits to their peers in sex education programs, These must be inclusive to help them understand gender and sexual identity issues with age-appropriate, medically accurate information, incorporate positive examples, and emphasize the need for protection during sex for people of all identities. Similarly, youth of color and students with disabilities need sexual health education that is culturally appropriate. We support the development of a working group that includes students. If this resolution passes, we will assist in recruiting students to serve on the work group, and we would be willing to provide a staff member to serve on the work group as well. Thank you for this opportunity to testify.
Thank you very much for your testimony. Up next, we have Faye Weldon, individual in support.
Aloha, my name is Faye Weldon. I am a junior at Assets High School and the co-founder and president of our GSA. So I am in support of this bill because I myself am a queer student. And through the past couple years that I've been at my school, starting the GSA has been the best thing we've done for our youth because our students are now much more accepting of others, as well as we've had students come out as transgender and not be able, and they were able to actually go and start their transitions. As well as this year, we had a beautiful girl come to prom in a dress, and I'm so proud of her because she is a trans woman. And I myself didn't have a very good sex education. And my freshman year, I started writing to the board of trustees that we should have a more inclusive education. And I opted out of my sex education class until my junior year, which is this year, when we changed our class to have correct, medically accurate representation of the queer community. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your testimony, Ms. Weldon. Members, that's all I have for my Zoom or in-person testifiers list. We also have a number of individuals in support: Hawaii Health and Harm Reduction Center in support, Hawaii Children's Action Network Speaks in support, and a number of individuals in support and one in opposition. Is there anyone else wishing to testify on this measure? And are there any questions?
I have a question.
Oh, Representative
For the DOE. So I find this measure very interesting, and what piques my interest is this notion of a student-led working group. Does the DOE have any kind of experience with student-led working groups?
In my short time in this role, I have not had that experience. I'm wondering if I could ask Mr. Miyamoto, our TA director, if he recalls any such experiences.
Good afternoon, everyone. Not from my experience from a working group standpoint, but we do have our student activities committee. We also have our student leadership committee that works together, but not specifically on a work group on a specific topic like this that makes recommendations to the department.
Thank you. I guess if I could just make a quick comment, I really think that this is an interesting resolution, and I appreciate the testimony of the DOE, but I think there are issues on the horizon that many states are dealing with, and the input around this very sensitive topic of, I think, students is so important because their perspective, and I learn this every day from my daughter when we talk about things around the dinner table. I think, you know, they may help us lead the way through some very difficult times and difficult conversations that the community needs to have. So wherever this resolution goes, I just hope that the DOE kind of remains open, because I think this is a very intriguing way to handle very tough issues. Thank you, Chair, and thank you.
Yes, thank you for your comment. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any other questions? Okay. Seeing none, we're getting there. We're almost done. We have HR 24, HCR 26. And up first, we have HSTA in support.
Hello, Chair Woodson, Vice Chair Capella, and members of the committee. I'm Osatui, President of the Hawaii State Teachers Association. I'm also currently on leave from this school, the home of the Tigers and of the Black and Gold, where I began working in 2001. I speak to you today in support of HR 24 and HCR 26. Being a longtime employee there, I understand the culture of pride and tradition, and I mean zero disrespect to my colleagues, friends, and the students past and present. What's in a name? Having a unique name myself, I understand that names are important. Where do we draw the line as a society, especially here in Hawaii, as to what is acceptable or not acceptable? We wouldn't allow a school to be named after a dictator or some other horrible historical figure. So then it becomes, where is the line that indicates disenfranchising one group is okay, but doing so for another group is not? Or is it okay that so long as enough time has passed, we can look the other way? I've walked those halls thousands of times and seen face after face of prominent graduates that are so proudly displayed in the Hall of Honor. If not Honolulu High, what about naming the school for someone that students can actually be proud of that graduated from that school? For example, Dukana Moku. He looks down upon the school from a recently painted larger-than-life mural on the next block. He has everything you would want to be an inspiration to students, a world-renowned legend in the sport of surfing who brought prestige to these islands and prominence to our native population. Changing the school's name won't wipe away these accomplishments achieved by the thousands who have passed through those hallowed halls. And likewise, changing the name won't change the history of what the man whom the school is named after did all those years ago. But in keeping the current name, we perpetuate that imperialism is something to be celebrated. What this man did in the past should remain in the history books with no need to idolize him and put him on prominent display in our public spaces. But changing the name will demonstrate to students that no matter how much time has passed, it's not too late to right this wrong. The time has come to do the right thing and support these resolutions. Mahalo.
Thank you very much for your testimony. Up next, we have from the Honolulu Youth Commission, Bronson Azama in support.
Yes, aloha mai kako. This is again Bronson Azama speaking on behalf of the Honolulu Youth Commission as its chair. Our Youth Commission did pass a resolution, which I believe was provided to all of you folks, in regards to supporting the changing of the name of the McKinley High School, as well as the removal of the McKinley statue and renaming the school into Honolulu High, for the purpose that all students deserve. And, going to the previous speaker of what they said of what's in a name, we have heard stories of Haumana that haven't perpetuated their own individual excellence due to how they felt about the name that was on their jersey or the name that was represented as their school. And so for us, it's a matter of, when it comes to all of our collective well-being, it depends on everybody's ability to conduct their own individual excellence. So if by changing a name changes their ability to really produce greatness, then we should change it. And that's something that the Youth Commission will stand on. And for myself speaking as an individual, we come as an individual and also as a Kanaka Maoli and even as a Filipino, because I know we have a whole mix of history tied to the imperialism of the United States. One of the writers of Mele Ai Pohaku Kalananapua, our famous song, was actually from the Philippines. I believe his name was Jose. I can't remember his last name, but he left the Philippines because Spain had occupied them, only to be occupied again by America. So, this is a shared history amongst not just Kanaka Maoli, but of all people, of the traumas that we inherit from the actions of the past. And again, kako'o, what was said previously, all the individuals that were honored from the school, they're remembered for their actions, not from the name of the place in which they attended. And, in changing the name, hopefully when it comes to Honolulu, if we change it to Honolulu High School, we can ground future students in place. Because what was Honolulu? Honolulu was that calm, beautiful bay that produced greatness in its own right. And if our children know what was, maybe they want to improve what is today. So in knowing that everybody deserves a chance to heal, and we all deserve our own ability to produce individual excellence. And I hope this measure isn't deferred. I hope that we can at least bring it to a vote so we can see where everybody stands, unlike last time. So mahalo nui for the opportunity to testify. And yeah, mahalo.
Thank you very much for your testimony. Up next, we have Regina Peterson in support.
Aloha mai kako, can you hear me?
Yes, please continue.
Mahalo for allowing me to share today. This statue in the name of the school, McKinley High School, is a key component to the political indoctrination strategy to brainwash the people living in Hawaii that they are American. A lie. A lie then, a lie now. There are so many things wrong about what this man stood for, and to have his statue and his name placed in honor is disgraceful to our kupuna who stood against this fake annexation he holds. I say this to the alumni and to the present students that are on this Zoom and who will be watching later. And just like the other two that had testified, your history, your connections, your relationships, your achievements from being in this school does not stem from this statue or his name. It comes from you. Allowing the statue and the name to remain any longer says you are okay with the robbery of the birthright, the cultural identity, the robbery of the nationality, the robbery of language, the robbery of homes of Native Hawaiians. You are okay with the physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, negative impact caused by this man and others like him. You are okay with the fraud he committed to continue the illegal occupation of the United States by signing the joint resolution, otherwise known as the Newlands Resolution. You are okay with the genocide of Native Americans in California, lynching of African Americans in southern states as he turned a blind eye to this during his presidency. You're okay with more than that. Removing this hideous statue and changing the name allows alumni and present students to make new history for yourselves and your school, and being the school that takes the step to heal a nation and its people. Changing the name allows honor to be given back to the people who stood to protect the land they love so much. Changing the name and removing the statue allows truth to be told and honored, just like the truth behind Christopher Columbus and Thanksgiving. Changing the name and removing the statue allows for future generations who attend this school to not have to live in the shadow of this dark history. Honolulu High School should be its name. If not, I support Duke Kahanamoku. But let this be a school that speaks truth going forward. Mahalo for letting me share.
Thank you very much for your testimony. Up next, we have Robert Lee in opposition. Okay, not present. Up next, we have Laverne Moore in support.
Aloha chairs and members of the committee. Oh, where's my video? Sugars. Oh, sugars. Just a minute. Okay, got it.
Awesome.
Okay, I, Laverne Fernandez Moore, strongly support this resolution. As a Native Hawaiian woman who grew up under colonization, I experienced it. I experienced it firsthand at a young age. I was forbidden to speak my native tongue. I was given an English first name. I could not practice my culture or celebrate my beliefs and values in public. Growing up, I felt conflicted and marginalized, but I didn't understand it, and I didn't know why. I wasn't proud of my Native Hawaiian identity until I became an adult and realized I need to fight for what is Pono. I started teaching special education at McKinley High School in 2001, and I absolutely love it. But I will always struggle with the name McKinley because President McKinley was responsible for the illegal overtake of our Hawaiian government and our freedom as Native Hawaiians. We were robbed of our rights, our land, and our resources. I've been walking those halls for more than 2 decades, and it still hurts. It will always hurt because we were deprived of so much. As HSTA's teacher lobbyist, I've testified on many measures, but this one is difficult because it is deeply personal and, to be honest, painful. I stand here before you today sharing my mana'o as a Native Hawaiian who was stripped of her rights and who carries a great love for this school and my students. We must stand to undo a legacy of colonization. It is always the right time to do the right thing. Please support this important resolution. Mahalo for the opportunity to testify.
Thank you very much for your testimony. That is all I have on my Zoom testifiers list and my in-person testifiers list. Is there anyone else wishing to testify on this measure?
Aloha, Chair, Vice Chair, members. My name is Nico Sleverins. I should be on the list. My testimony.
Yes, you are. I'm sorry, there were more pages. I didn't flip enough. Please continue.
Okay. I just wanted to testify in strong support of this measure. For those McKinley alumni who are asserting a property interest to their institutional name, I would note that Hawaii Public Schools belong to the people of Hawaii, and they are not the exclusive property of alumni or even school administrators. I believe that McKinley High School should be returned to the name Honolulu High School, which is a place name. And as a general practice, that's what things should be named after in this land of ours, because that's the way our indigenous cultures signified a place. The continued use of McKinley High School, the name McKinley High School is really an embodiment of the kind of structural racism that this legislature declared a public health crisis last year via HCR 112, offered by the House Majority Leader, who was in the room earlier today. And I would also note that, the McKinley and Roosevelt legacy of imperialism extended widely across this Pacific, and it included the slaughter of hundreds of thousands of Filipinx in their homeland, asserting their right to self-determination. So I would humbly suggest that the name of Roosevelt High School also be changed to whatever place name that people choose. Mahalo.
Thank you very much, and thank you for speaking up as well. Okay, since we flipped the page, there are more people. Leon Sue, in support.
Oops. Yes, aloha.
Aloha.
Oh,
Continue.
let me get my video started. Okay, aloha. I'm very happy to be here today, and mahalo for introducing this measure because it's very important and dear to all of us. As previous speakers have really eloquently outlined what the situation is and why we need to have the name changed. But I wanted to take a slightly different tack on this. Today, the world expresses its outrage at the Russian invasion of Ukraine. Even Hawaii leaders have decried the destructive action. But something similar happened here in Hawaii in 1893, when America invaded in support of insurgents fomenting a regime change. But the world raised no objection. Then in 1898, led by President McKinley, America brazenly stole our country, and the world remained silent. State of Hawaii leaders condemning the Russian invasion of Ukraine have no moral basis to do so without first condemning America's invasion and annexation of the Hawaiian Islands. The legacy of President McKinley was that he led the US to commit brazen crimes against humanity. The Hawaiian people, as well as Native Americans, Filipinos, the natives of Honduras, Guatemala, etc., all suffered tremendous harm from McKinley's policies. Today, we're grappling with the truth of what happened in Hawaii. Ironically, one of Hawaii's premier schools stubbornly holds to the name of President William McKinley, honoring the destructive and historically disgraced US leader. It would be as if 124 years from now, a school in Ukraine would insist on bearing the name of Vladimir Putin. So I wanted just to bullet point a few of the things that previous speakers have already spoken about. I have 5 points here. One, William McKinley's policies were driven by his white supremacist racist beliefs. He said that annexing Hawaii was tantamount to a moral obligation because Hawaiians were too primitive and backward to be able to govern themselves, ignoring, of course, that we had been self-governing since time immemorial. President McKinley was a major proponent of manifest destiny, the political doctrine that the United States says is they're destined by God to expand the US's dominion around the world. So this drove President McKinley as well as those that supported the annexation of Hawaii. Two, McKinley acted against the Hawaiians' love for their nation, against Aloha Aina. No vote for annexation was ever conducted in Hawaii because Hawaiians strongly opposed annexation. In 1897, 39,000 Hawaiian nationals signed petitions categorically opposing annexation. This represented the will of over 80% of the adult population of Hawaii. The petition was delivered to Congress, and it stopped the ratification of the treaty in its tracks. But President McKinley and his cohorts in Congress devised a way to skirt the law. Number three, President McKinley faked Hawaii's annexation. This is where they skirted the law. And this has already been elaborated upon, that they used a joint resolution of Congress, which is totally incapable of annexing a foreign country. But that's what was used. But the result of the usurpation or annexation displaced Hawaiians, robbed Hawaiians of their identity, their lands, their homes, and their physical, psychological, spiritual well-being. It turned the Hawaiian Islands into an overseas colony, completely dependent on the US for everything, which is sort of where we are today, completely dependent on the US.
Leon, I have to ask you to wrap up.
Okay, two other items. Four, the schools were turned into centers for American indoctrination. And five, Honolulu High School was renamed President McKinley High School as part of that indoctrination program. So to continue honoring President William McKinley ignores and condones the travesties he committed against the people and nation of Hawaii. And for those reasons and more, the name of President William McKinley High School should be changed. Mahalo.
Thank you very much for your testimony. Okay. Is there anyone else wishing to testify on this measure? Please come forward now. Okay. Or on Zoom, if there's anyone else that would like to testify. Okay. We have a number of individuals, both in support and in opposition. Some of the organizations are League of Women Voters in support, Quad D Solutions in opposition, the Association of Hawaiian Civic Clubs in support, and HSTA Human and Civil Rights Committee in support, Center for Hawaiian Sovereignty Studies in opposition, the CoLab Co-working and Community Space in support, Quad D Solutions in opposition, and a number of other individuals. Members, are there any questions? Chair.
Thank you, Chair. Is DOE here? Facilities, or someone like to speak on behalf of DOE facilities?
Sorry, Ken Kakisako, Department of Education. We can help.
Thank you again for being here. And so, just asking an open-ended question. This topic continues to generate a lot of discussion. And so, has the department thought about changing the name of the school?
So we do have a process for that. We do have board policy 301-8 that outlines how to go about changing the name of either schools or facilities. And I know we have a number of resolutions on the docket relating to those. So there is a process for that. We do like to leave that to the school community and the school itself to best judge that. And it does go through their school community councils to involve the community in making that judgment call.
Okay, so I think I asked a similar question last year, and I'm wondering, like, what are the mechanisms that are in place that would actually catalyze action towards that formal discussion?
So we would leave it to our school principal. So it would be our McKinley High School, in this case, McKinley High School principal and his school community council for them to have that discussion. And my understanding is they did have the discussion. It did come up in a school community council, and I'm not, those notes are available, but I was not there for that meeting, but it did sound like they did discuss it. And at the time, the decision was made to keep it as McKinley High School.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I have a question for HSTA. Hello. So opponents of the resolution say that the restoring of McKinley's original name is equivalent to rewriting history. As a teacher from McKinley, how do you respond to that? And how would changing the name impact the learning environments for students and teachers at this school?
Well, we talk about being place-based, and I think the changing of the name back to Honolulu High at minimum would definitely support doing place-based education, right? We don't do place-based education by honoring those who have taken over this place. And I think this is a great lesson that can be taught to these students, that you can right a wrong, that a wrong doesn't have to exist forever. It can be righted. I don't know if I fully answered your question.
No, you did. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We can definitely right all of our wrongs, and I'd hope that we will do so. Members, are there any other questions? Okay, seeing none, moving on. Our last two measures, HR 64, HCR 71. I have Regina Peterson in opposition. Okay. I don't know if Ms. Peterson is there. If she appears, we'll go back to
Sorry,
you.
yes, there. Kalamai. I'm in total opposition of this particular resolution. I would love to read my statement all over again for those that have not heard it, if that's okay, because I had added on a little bit more to it, if that's okay.
If you can, why don't you read the add-on, because all of the
Okay,
members,
I'll do
we're,
that.
we're still here.
That's not a problem. That is not a problem. The one thing that I wanted to address is because this resolution is in reference to the fallen, to honor the fallen who went to this school. So I mean, no disrespect to those that have fallen. In fact, the soldiers of the 442nd that attended Honolulu High School, who fought in World War II, who fought and died for the same thing. They fought and died for the same thing we in Hawaii and other countries are fighting for now. Like Mr. Seo said, like Germany, a bigger nation, invaded by Poland, a smaller nation, and tried to bully their way through Europe. Like Russia invading Ukraine today. Like the US invaded Hawaii and continues to bully Hawaii's descendants till today. President William McKinley played, again, one of the biggest, the largest part of that dark history. It would be actually a greater honor to the soldiers that fought and died for the liberation of those smaller countries by removing this statue and changing that name back to Honolulu High School. The school, again, that speaks truth, that lives truth, and honors its people in truth. Mahalo.
Thank you very much for your testimony. And next we have Nikos Leverins in opposition. Nikos, are you there? Okay. Next, we have Shane Kanashiro in support.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so thank you, committee, for letting me testify today. My name is Shane Kanashiro, and I'm a sophomore and a JRTC cadet at McKinney High School, and I support this resolution. We just concluded the principal's review and the celebration of 100 years of JRTC with distinguished members of society. So we must pay tribute to safeguard the name of McKinney High School to perpetuate the reverence of McKinney High School's 143 fallen soldiers of valor for their nation with resolute and moral rectitude from a cultural heritage standpoint. It is a duty and an obligation to honor the legacy of the school that had educated and established the pride and tradition. The name of McKinney High School represents the students like myself and teachers and alumni, especially the men who volunteered and enlisted as soldiers to the war efforts of World War II. The name McKinney High School will memorize the remains who are laid to rest at the National Memorial Cemetery of the Pacific and those who never returned home, buried on foreign land. The soldiers of McKinney High School distinction shall never be forgotten. Please support this resolution.
Thank you very much for your testimony. Thank you for being here. Okay, that's all I have on my Zoom and in-person testifiers list. Is there anyone else wishing to testify on this measure?
Aloha mai, this is Branson. Would I be able to testify as an individual? So just in regards to my opinion, like how I kind of said in the previous measure, just that, you know, we're talking about these individuals and their actions. Their actions are how they're memorialized, not by the name of the school that they went to. And, you know, even in changing the name, their history is still going to be there. It's not like we totally erased McKinley High School and all the individuals who went there from the books. It's just, you know, ongoing history of even the school itself, which has a long history of not even necessarily being in the same location too. But we're always going to remember those individuals for their actions, not for the name of the school that they went to. So it's almost, it kind of dumbfounds me that we tether people's actions to the name of the school that they went to. It's a very strange argument, in my opinion. Mahalo.
Thank you. Thank you for your testimony. Okay, is there anyone else wishing to testify on this measure? In Zoom land or in person? Okay. Members, are there any questions? Okay, seeing none, moving on to our last measure, HR 3, HCR 7. I have one testifier in support, but not present. Is there anyone else wishing to speak on this measure? Members, are there any questions? Not that you could ask them one. But seeing none, we're gonna recess for decision making. Recess. Coming back in for decision making on our 2 o'clock agenda for resolutions. Okay. First up, we have HR 93. Vice Chair's recommendation is to pass with technical amendments. Members, are there any questions or comments? If not, Chair for the vote.
Thank you, Chair. Members voting on HR 93, the Chair's recommendation is to pass with amendments. Chair and Vice Chair vote aye. Representative Belatti.
Aye.
Representative Clark.
Aye.
Representative Casillas.
Aye.
Representative Gannon.
Aye.
Representative Gates. Excuse. Representative Hashimoto.
Aye.
Representative Ono. Excuse. Representative Quinlan.
Aye.
Representative Takayama.
Aye.
Representative Yamane.
Aye.
Representative Okimoto.
Aye.
Recommendation is adopted, Chair.
Thank you very much. Moving on to HR 11, HCR 13. Vice Chair's recommendation is to pass with tech amendments. Members, are there any questions? Okay, Chair for the vote.
Members voting on HCR 13, HR 11, the Chair's recommendation is to pass with amendments, noting the excused absences of Representatives Ono and Gates. Members, are there any noes or reservations? Recommendation adopted.
Okay, thank you very much, members. Up next, we have HR 17, HR 19, HCR 19. Vice Chair's recommendation is to pass with amendments. On page 2, line 40, changing the phrase vacant classroom space to classroom space not used for instructional purposes. Members, are there any questions? Seeing none, Chair for the vote.
Thank you, members voting on HCR 19, HR 17. The Chair's recommendation is to pass with amendments, noting the excused absences of Representatives Ono and Gates. Members, are there any noes or reservations? Recommendation is adopted, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair. Moving on to HR 35, HCR 40. Vice Chair's recommendation is to pass with tech amendments. Members, are there any questions? Seeing none, Chair for the vote.
Thank you, Chair. Members voting on HCR 40, HR 35. The recommendation is to pass with amendments, noting the excused absences of Representatives Ono and Gates. Members, are there any reservations or noes? Recommendation adopted.
Thank you, Chair. Moving on to HR 45, HCR 50. Vice Chair's recommendation is to pass with amendments. We're going to revise the title on page 1 and the resolve clause on page 2 to call on the DOE to convene a working group on school bus transportation inequity and ask the working group to submit a report to the legislature before the 2023 legislative session. Members, are there any questions? Seeing none, Chair for the vote.
Thank you, Chair. Members voting on HCR 50, HR 45. The recommendation is to pass with amendments, noting the excused absences of Rep. Ono and Gates. Members, are there any reservations or noes? Seeing none, recommendation adopted.
Thank you, Chair. Moving on to HR 46, HCR 51. Vice Chair's recommendation is to pass with amendments. On page 2, add several whereas clauses to include data about the positive impact of air conditioning on student achievement. Members, are there any questions? Seeing none, Chair for the vote.
Thank you. Members voting on HCR 51, HR 46. The recommendation is to pass with amendments, noting the excused absence of Representatives Gates and Ono. Is there any noes or reservations? Recommendation adopted, Chair.
Thank you very much, Chair. Moving on, HR 50, HCR 56. Vice Chair's recommendation is to pass the technical amendments. Are there any questions? Seeing none, Chair for the vote.
Thank you, members voting on HCR 56, HR 50. The Chair's recommendation is to pass with amendments, noting the excused absences of Representatives Gates and Ono. Members, are there any reservations or noes? Chair, your recommendation is adopted.
Thank you very much. Moving on to HR 67, HCR 74. Vice Chair's recommendation is to pass as is. Members, are there any questions? Seeing none, Chair for the vote.
Thank you, Chair. Members voting on HCR 74, HR 67. The Chair's recommendation is to pass unamended, noting the excused absence of Representatives Ono and Gates. Members, are there any no's or reservations? Recommendation adopted, Chair.
Thank you very much. Thank you, members. Moving on to HR 134, HCR 134. Vice Chair's recommendation is to pass with tech amendments. Members, are there any questions? Seeing none, Chair for the vote.
Thank you. Members voting on HCR 134, HR 134, the chair's recommendation is to pass with amendments, noting the excused absences of Representatives Gates and Ono. Members, are there any no's or reservations? Recommendation adopted.
Thank you, Chair. Moving on to HR 135, HCR 135. Vice Chair's recommendation is to pass as is. Members, are there any questions? Seeing none, Chair for the vote.
Thank you. Members voting on HCR 135, HR 135, the recommendation is to pass as is, noting the excused absences of Representatives Ono and Gates. Members, are there any no's or reservations? Chair, your recommendation is adopted.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, members. Moving on to HR 164, HCR 164. Vice Chair's recommendation is to pass as is. Members, are there any questions? Seeing none, Chair for the vote.
Thank you, Chair. Members voting on HCR 164, HR 164, recommendation is to pass as is, noting the excused absences of Ono, Representatives Ono and Representatives Gates. Members, with any reservations or no's? Recommendation adopted.
Thank you, Chair. Moving on to HR 138, HCR 138. Vice Chair's recommendation is to pass as is. Members, are there any questions, comments, or concerns? Seeing none, Chair for the vote.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Members, the recommendation is to pass as is, voting on HCR 138, HR 138. Are there any reservations or no's?
No vote.
Thank you. Any other reservations or no's? Chair, your recommendation is adopted.
Thank you very much, members. Okay, voting on HR 24, HCR 26. First, I want to thank the members for hearing both of these measures relating to McKinley. And it is my belief that we really need to advance this conversation. Year after year, I feel like individuals have come to the legislature and asked to be heard in creating a process for marginalized voices, and just to be heard and to change the historical injustice that I think have been endured by Native Hawaiians and other Pacific Islanders across our state. So my recommendation is to pass with amendments. And the amendments are as follows. We are going to change the title and the primary result section of this resolution to urge the Department of Education and the Board of Education to convene a working group to consider the restoration of Hawaiian place names throughout Hawaii's public school system. We are going to insert several whereas clauses at the beginning of the resolution that makes reference to Nahopena'a'o, which is the DOE's place-based framework and articulates the department's core values and mission. We are going to shorten, but not remove, the resolution sections that outline the concerns about President William McKinley by deleting the historical background information from page 1, line 26 through page 2, line 41. We are going to add additional whereas clauses on page 4, or an additional whereas clause on page 4 that says, whereas government agencies throughout Hawaii have enacted numerous policies calling for the restoration of Hawaiian place names, greater respect for Hawaiian culture, and strengthened protections for Hawaiian tradition and customary practice, and a more complete understanding of historical injustices endured by Hawaiian people. We are also going to ask that the working group submit a report to the legislature before the 2023 legislative session with its findings and recommendations. I think that these changes will allow us to advance a broad conversation about uplifting Hawaiian place names throughout the DOE, about McKinley, but also with regard to our public school systems across our entire state. So I think that these changes will situate these conversations within the context of our efforts to restore dignity to Hawaii's Native people, which is something that this House has truly prioritized this legislative session. Members, are there any questions, comments, or concerns?
Just brief comment. Thank you, Vice Chair. First of all, I want to say that I'm very impressed with this compromise that we've reached. I think, I applaud you for your agility and your perspicacity. Unfortunately, regrettably, I'll be voting no on this resolution. While I firmly and strongly support Hawaiian place names and reverting back to original names, I have a fear from my own community. A couple of years ago, some folks tried to rename our state championship Red Raiders football team. And I worry that this might turn into sort of a broader conversation. So regretfully at this time, I don't. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Members, Representative Sawayama.
I as well would like to thank Vice Chair for offering this compromise. I think it's a important step. But I need to let you know that I'll be voting no, because it's my firm belief that we have a State Board of Education to set policy for our Hawaii public schools, just as we have a Board of Regents to set policy for the University of Hawaii system. And I do not think that we serve our purpose well by interfering with the policies in both respects. My concern is that setting this working group sets them down a path to which I don't know the end. I attended Farrington High School and Dole Intermediate, and by all rights, the roles of Sanford Ballard Dole and Wallace Ryder Farrington ought to be examined in Hawaiian history as well. And for that matter, Washington Intermediate and Jefferson Elementary are named after major slaveholders in colonial days. So what I would rather see as an alternative is a curriculum that encourages our students to engage in critical discussions of their school namesakes, positive and negative, and let that be a part of their education. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Representative Hashimoto.
Thank you, Vice Chair. I too would like to express my appreciation for your compromise. I unfortunately will also have to vote no, just on, I think more on principle in terms of, I share Representative Takayama's sentiments about the Board of Education. I think as a student member that served on the Board of Education way back when, I think back then that's when we passed Act 51, 2004. That was supposed to reinvent the way that schools are governed. And each school is supposed to have a school community council. And the Board of Education actually has a policy 301-8 that asks each of the school community councils, when you're naming facilities, that they play the big role in naming those facilities. And so I think part of it is we want each community to have that conversation. I don't think it's us, the legislature, that should be leading the conversation about name changes. It should be each school having that critical conversation. And that was the role, that was the purpose of Act 51, was to set up each school's governing board to kind of have that conversation and to decide what changes they wanted to do. I understand that the intent of Act 51 may not be followed, but I want to encourage anyone who has concerns about any particular name, go to your school community council. That's the place. You have the power to make that change. And that was the original intent of that legislation that passed back in 2004. So I think for those reasons, I think everyone has that opportunity to have that conversation right here, right now. And I encourage them to have that conversation. And I also believe that, maybe the board does need to look at that policy, but I think the policy, when reading it, it really puts it back on the community for naming each of those facilities. And so I think it's a pretty sound policy to me. And I hope each school actually goes and reads that board policy. So for that reason, I'm voting no. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anyone else? Representative Yamane.
Thank you. I concur with many of the comments being said. I wanted to let the Vice Chair know that I'll be also voting no. I do think there is a process in place. Even if, let's say, you don't bring it up to the SSCs, you can always bring it up directly to the board, bring it up on their agenda. I think there's a larger discussion with this, and I think I applaud your measure forward, also your willingness to put in a task force. However, I think there are processes in, and we sit across like Randy people all the time that they already have a current mechanism that can address this community discussion immediately. They could actually bring it up at the next board meeting or put it at least on the agenda. So there is no, it's up to the DOE that they can take this issue up quickly and present it to the community and get feedback rather than waiting for a reso. So with those issues and those comments, I'll be voting on. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Representative Casales.
Yes, I also want to say thank you for really trying to work this. It's an important discussion. I think it has to continue. But I'll be voting no. And also because of the process that's already in place with the school community council. I served on school community council for 7 years. It's made up of students, parents, community members, teachers. So it does have a good group there that can be seen as a working group. A lot of people dedicate their time, and I think we should try to support that. And also, I want to say that it doesn't stop here. I think we saw from the students who were involved on the Filipino culture and history that they took the matter into their own hands and moved it forward, and are really making a lot of accomplishments. So I think just because I'm voting no here, I don't see this as a stopping place for this discussion and activity and moving forward with it. So I would just encourage that.
Thank you very much. Okay, anyone else? Or forever hold your peace, at least on this measure. Okay. Chair for the vote.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Members voting on HCR 26, HR 24. The chair's recommendation is to pass with amendments, noting the excused absences of Representatives Ono and Gates, noting the stated noes of Representative Castillas, Representative Hashimoto, Representative Quinlan, Representative Takayama, Representative Yamane. With all else voting aye, the recommendation.
No vote. I can't hear you. Sorry, Chair. No vote for Rep. Okimoto.
No vote for Clark, please.
Chair, your recommendation is not adopted.
Thank you, Chair. Okay. I want to thank the members for being willing to take their vote in public. I think it's important that we begin to have these conversations in a very open capacity so that the public knows where we stand. And I thank every single person for their comments. Okay, moving on to HR 64, HCR 71. Vice Chair's recommendation is to defer. We will be moving on to HR 3, HCR 7. Vice Chair's recommendation is to pass as is. Members, are there any questions, comments, or concerns? Seeing none, Chair for the vote.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Members voting on HCR 7, HR 3. Chair's recommendation is to pass unamended, noting the excused absences of Representatives Ono and Gates. Members, are there any reservations or no? Chair, your recommendation is adopted.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you, members. We're adjourned.